Welcome. This is our plan to retire with $5 million. Throughout the years, our goals has changed. It wasn't always $5 million. It started much lower when we were without family and children and living in different areas. So in this video, we'll explore how that numbers changed and the reason for that. So based on the 4% guidelines or rule of thumb, we plan to retire with $100,000 a year, which amounted to 2.5 million. So this is when we were younger, still early in our careers and without family. So this number for us was a fat fire lifestyle um, compared to where we lived and our expenses. Of course, that has changed throughout the years. So let's see how this number has evolved. So children are expensive. uh, you'll be told that kids are expensive and are expensive, but you won't realize about how much until you have your first child. So when our first child happened, we were thinking, well, it won't be as bad as we think. We're frugal by nature. We weren't living in an expensive place. And how much does a baby eat anyway? Oh boy, were we wrong. You'll see in a lot of different videos in this channel on how expensive kids are. But based on that rule of thumb, like we budgeted 300,000 for child number one, and this number came about after a year of the child being born. So we saw the expense of just piling up childcare, daycare, summer programs, food. Obviously, they eat a lot. Well, they don't keep most of it down, but they do eat. Uh, so as you can imagine, it caused our budget to increase quite significantly. Like this is 300,000 is about 10% budget, and if you're familiar with budgeting, 10% is usually your rainy day fund sort of scale. So basically, the first kid blew through the rainy day without even thinking about it. And why stop there, right? We had more children. Uh, Budget was never a concern for us for the amount of children or their lifestyle, but oh, when the second and third child came, we were aware of the cost that they are going to incur. We budgeted accordingly and increased our budget and our target. At that point, we already were close to that retirement target age, but we chose to enlarge our family and work for a few more years versus retiring at that point. I know people do it on the lean fire lifestyle where they by educating their kids themselves, they don't have the childcare and summer camp type expensive that are pretty expensive for children, especially in the younger age, like our kids are. We chose not to. We're not good educators, homeschoolers. We tried that with the first child for a few months, but we realized it's not our expertise. So we rather outsource the education portion of our kids and focus on our main um, W-2 type income where um, we make a lot more. So now, after child two and three are born, each one incurred a 300K increment to our retirement budget. So now we're at 3.4. Well, at that point, you should ask yourself, well, 3.4, you were close to retirement at 2.5. How long do you need to get to 3.4? As we were nearing this number or that time frame, we were looking at our budget and realized, well, we budgeted for kids, but we forgot a couple of things. Kids have auxiliary expenses that are needed, plus as you go older, more expensive. So things we forgot to budget for. New cars. I put new cars here, but this is more like new everything can be a washer, dryer, car, roof. We're planning to rent, but this is more like things of that nature where depending on the country, some countries don't have all the utilities we're accustomed to. For example, a dryer and healthcare. So new car wise or new instrument wise, it's not a lot compared. It's another 20K a year, which in retirement fund com- relates to about 200, $300,000 for new expenses, or sorry, retirement budget. But healthcare, that's the main one. So we're in the U.S. Um, so if we were to retire here, our family budget, this incurs about a 40K increase a year. Worst case scenario without ACA subsidies, which deserve a whole other chapter on healthcare and ways to mitigate that cost. There's not a lot of good ways, but there are a couple of ways. Anyway, All of these are just like big ticket items that we, well, forgot to include. Realistically, like we were younger when we started this budget, and like new cars, who needs a new car? We'll buy a car every 10 to 11 years. Well, that adds up. If you don't save for a car every year, even if you replace a car every 10 years, that adds up. And a car is not the only expense, right? You need a washer dry and a sink cadence about every 10 years or so, a roof every 15 to 20 years or so. These sorts of expenses do add up. New laptops, new cell phones every couple of years as well. They add up, and we didn't allocate for them when we were creating the budget originally, and we had to, right, to be realistic with our retirement budget. So after all said and done, the big ticket items, we're at 4.4 million. So why do we say we need 5 million? Well, we started this retirement thinking or fire journey about 10 years ago when we were younger, earning less, of course, but also younger. And as time progresses, we're like, okay, our lifestyle has expanded. Are we comfortable going back to the lifestyle we had 10 years ago? You know, living in smaller motels or things of that, using budget airlines or, choosing a connecting flight versus a direct flight, things of that nature. So travel is a big chunk of our retirement plan, both from a spending perspective and a time perspective. And we decided to look at ourselves and figure out, well, how long will the extra money we need to for our travel budget cost us from a W-2 perspective? Like, how much longer should we work? And we came to the conclusion that another 300,000 to the travel budget, which relates to about, what was that, $10,000 a year, give or take, for our travel budget, will convey us from a like frugal travel to normal travel, which we're accustomed to now. This might inflate a bit more as we progress, but at this point where we're traveling with our kids, um, we take the expensive room or expensive travel anyway. So if it delays or expands this budget, we see it also contract when the kids set up to their own lives. So the budget will stay the same. It will just be like we'll spend it on less people than we do now, which equates to a built-in travel inflation budget sort of approach. So a little bit about us. We are two working parents. Our main source of income is a W-2 salary for both me and my partner. In addition to that, we have three children, ranging in age from 4 to 8, and we live in a high cost of living area. That will explain some of our expenses in a later portion of the video. So this brings us back to our first slide of how our budget has changed or our retirement goal has changed. As you can see, every 2 or 3 years, there's like a big jump. That has to do with kids, but it also has to do with our lifestyle. We currently see a status quo. COVID has disrupted it quite a bit, but even pre-COVID, we were like, this seems like a good place where we are from 5 million target perspective. And we're nearing that goal faster than we anticipated, which is great. Here's to another good year, and hopefully this budget will not increase anymore. Um, because if you look at the absolute number of $5 million US, that brings you to about the top 2% of the US net worth. I think the top 1% is about $13 million, um, which is, it's where f.i.r.e is. It's where we're comfortable. But realistically, compared to the rest of the population, yes, you can always go higher, but at this point, if where our lifestyle is better than 98% of the U.S. population, and if you're looking globally, it's in the top 1% or even more than that. Um, it's a good number. It's a happy number. Um, we like it. We really are objecting to it growing even more. If it grows even more, we will start looking at our lifestyle and our choices to figure out what we need to change in order to be a productive member of the society when we retire. Productive in terms of contributing back, not directly donations, but just making the world a better place as a retired person. and you need to draw less from the world versus what we do now when we're still working and time is not a resource we have an abundance of.